My name is Anna, and my parents have always loved my older sister, Cassie, more than they ever loved me. Cassie has always been their golden child who could do no wrong, whereas I was always an afterthought. Sometimes it's like they forgot I even existed. Most years they wouldn't remember my birthday, while Cassie got the biggest celebrations and everything she wanted. Anything I did went ignored by my parents. My grades were perfect, and I was described. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own home? I've felt that way my entire life. My name is Anna, and my parents have always loved my older sister, Cassie, more than they ever loved me. Cassie has always been their golden child who could do no wrong, whereas I was always an afterthought. Sometimes it's like they forgot I even existed. Most years they wouldn't remember my birthday, while Cassie got the biggest celebrations and everything she wanted. Anything I did went ignored by my parents. My grades were perfect, and I was described by my teachers as a great student. But that wasn't enough for my mom and dad. Cassie was always prettier and more popular, which made our parents look good, so they let her get away with whatever she wanted. They went so far as to throw her the biggest parties with the most expensive gifts, while they hardly remembered my birthday most of the time. I remember one year I tried to remind them that my birthday was coming up. It didn't go well. Mom? Dad?
What do you want?
I was wondering if we could go out for my birthday this year. My parents looked at one another in confusion, and I knew they'd forgotten my birthday again. I should have been used to it at that point, but even after so many years of being ignored, it still stung.
You already celebrated this year, haven't you?
No. My birthday's this weekend, and I was thinking that
This weekend. That's not right. That's Cassie's birthday.
if it wasn't bad enough that my parents forgot my own birthday, they would also mistake it for Cassie's birthday and throw her another party. And Cassie herself never seemed to care. She could do whatever she wanted, and our parents would always take her side, so she got away with everything. As I got older, she started going out of her way to taunt me, always making jokes and comments about how I wasn't good enough for our family. There were times she would do it right in front of Mom and Dad, and they never cared. As the less popular child, I didn't have a lot of friends in school, so I had nobody to talk to. I knew what was going on wasn't normal, but I couldn't tell anyone about it. The only thing that distracted me from my feelings of loneliness and helplessness was the thought of going to college. I would be away from my family and everything they put me through, and I would be able to make friends and get the job I've been dreaming about since I was a kid. The years passed, and I kept my grades up, so the colleges I applied to were sure to let me in. I even managed to participate in a couple of extracurriculars. By the time I graduated high school, I was at the top of my class. My family wasn't there, and the seats reserved for my parents and Cassie were empty. I didn't care, though. I'd been accepted into college a week before, and I was going to leave my tragic home life behind me. At least, that's what I thought. Then I got home. I told my parents that I was going up to my room to pack, but their questions stopped me in my tracks.
Pack for what?
College? I got accepted into my first choice last week. The school year starts in a few months.
You're not going to college.
What? Why not?
You can't afford it.
Yes, I can. I'll use my college fund and get financial aid.
You don't have a college fund. You never did. How?
I couldn't believe what I heard. I knew my parents had been saving up money for Cassie to go to college, so I thought they had done the same for me. Turns out I was wrong. That can't be true. Cassie has a college fund, but she's not even going to school.
Cassie needs the money.
Why? It's not like she's going to use it on anything valuable, just more parties and expensive shopping trips.
How dare you? She's the older sister. Her needs are more important.
Something inside of me snapped that night. I had always wanted to go to college. I was the good kid with perfect grades, and I just found out that I couldn't afford to go. I was stuck at home being the unloved child, while Cassie got to do whatever she wanted. I wasn't about to accept that. Without another word, I marched up to my room and packed my bags. Even though I didn't have the money to attend college, I still had some money saved up from the jobs I took while in school. It wasn't my first choice, but I'd be able to afford a small apartment somewhere away from my family. And with my experience, I'd be able to find a steady job soon after. It would take me quite a while to save up, and yet I didn't care. As long as I could get into college, it would be worth it. A couple of years passed, and I made my job work, I was a dedicated employee, and my boss recognized that, giving me a promotion with a big raise. I had cut my family out of my life entirely, and every day I woke up happier and happier for it. Since moving out, I was no longer being tormented by others, and I was able to make friends at work. One of these friends would introduce me to one of the executives at the publishing house in town. Ever since I was a kid, I'd wanted to work in publishing and help authors get their stories out into the world. I made sure to leave a good impression on the executive, and a few weeks later I got a call asking if I'd be interested in working for the publishing house. Of course, I said yes, and soon after that I was working my dream job. During the publishing process, I met one of the authors that worked with the publishing house, and we hit it off. We started dating a few weeks later. Not long after that, one of his books started to get more and more popular and he got more attention. I didn't think much of it until one day I got a couple visitors while at work. When I went to see who it was, I was shocked to find my parents there.
Anna, it's wonderful to see you again.
What do you want?
We wanted to see you again.
We noticed that you're doing very well for yourself. A good job, a famous boyfriend.
That why you're both here? To flaunt me and my success around like you did with Cassie?
That isn't true. We care about you.
No, you don't. You never cared about me. You just want to look like your good parents because I became successful. You don't want anything to do with me. You never did, just like how I want nothing to do with you. My parents have always been that way. They want to look like good parents instead of actually being good parents. That was the reason why Cassie was always their favorite. Being popular and pretty gets a lot of attention, and it always made our parents look good. Well, I wouldn't let my parents use my success as a way to boost their public image, and I once again cut off contact with them. As it turned out, the reason they found me again to begin with was because Cassie had caused them a massive amount of embarrassment back home, and lost all the money they had set aside for her. After I left, Cassie spent all the money on a sports car and a luxurious trip for her and her friends. They ended up getting into a minor crash on the way. Everybody was okay, but Cassie got in some major trouble for the incident. When the police responded to the crash, they found Cassie acting weird, and then realized she was either drunk or on drugs. So they took her to the station and tested her and found that she was indeed on drugs. They showed her no sympathy, and she ended up spending a few months behind bars while my parents had to pay huge amounts of money as compensation to the city, as Cassie had caused a lot of damage to light poles and one of the city's parks. Everybody started looking to our parents and criticized them for letting her get in that kind of trouble to begin with. They were so desperate to salvage their reputation that they sought me out after a few years without contact. I guess they thought if they sucked up to me and told me what I wanted to hear, then I'd let them back into my life, and they could use my success to feel like good parents again. But I knew better. Cassie tried to talk to me again, too. She didn't apologize for the way she treated me, instead asking if there was some kind of job I could get for her. Since the accident she was in, nobody back home wanted to hire her. Her name carried a bad reputation, and they didn't want to take the chance on her. I told her no, that if she ever wanted to be a part of my life, then she would need to apologize for everything she did to me and become a better person. She refused, and I cut her off again, just like I did with our parents. But then I got a great idea, and I went to my boyfriend and asked for him to write a story about my life, but to make it with some supernatural twists so that it was a bit more interesting. In it, he made my sister and parents the villains, and after the success of his first book, this one took off and became incredibly popular. Within weeks of it going public, my family contacted me once again.
Anna, you need to get that boyfriend of yours to stop selling this book. Everyone knows it's a story about us. All our friends and coworkers are making fun of us and looking down their noses at us.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's just a work of fiction.
No, Anna, it isn't. Sure, there is some stuff in there that's fiction, but everyone knows that it's loosely based on us. Come on, you're making us look bad.
They're right. The accident was bad enough, but because of this, not only can I not get a job, but no boy will date me. They're all afraid that I'll treat them badly, and they all think I'm a trash person. Please have some compassion.
Compassion? You can't be serious. Compassion isn't something the three of you understand. Listen, the three of you did this to yourselves. You treated me terribly, and now this is your just desserts. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have better things to do. It hasn't been easy making a good life for myself. It was scary moving to a new town and getting a new job. I had to work long days and nights to get noticed by my boss, and I worked even harder to prove myself when I was offered my dream job. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel.
Some of you might think I'm exaggerating when I say this, but I'd rather take my orphanage back than Aunt Nancy ever again. Sure, the children's home was physically abusive, but Nancy was cruel in both the physical and emotional way. She would try to avoid me as much as possible, even though she was my literal guardian. And whenever she did decide to interact with me, it wasn't pleasant. Hi everybody, I'm Mateo, and I have quite a fun story to tell everybody. This is the story on how I got revenge on my aunt, who treated me absolutely horribly. I still have no regrets about what happened to her. I'll just get right to it now. So I'm from a country in South America. I grew up in a home for kids since my parents had died when I was young. The workers always neglected everyone's basic needs and hit us often. I still have scars from the amount of times they lashed out on me. One day, these missionaries from America visited our region, and a couple that was on the trip came by and wanted to adopt me. So, through a lot of legal procedures, I became a US citizen, and I was flown out of my home country. It was a very hard change for me now, because I was already 9 when my new parents adopted me. I had to learn English, which was difficult and even more embarrassing, since everyone else around me has spoken English for their entire lives. There were also quite the cultural differences which I had to adjust to, and having parents now in general was something I had to quickly get used to. Luckily, my new parents were extremely patient and kind with me, which I was grateful for. We made many memories together, but again, my mom and dad passed away 5 years later. They were killed instantly as a result of a car crash, which absolutely devastated me. I was then sent to live with my Aunt Nancy, who was my dad's sister. Some of you might think I'm exaggerating when I say this, but I'd rather take my orphanage back than Aunt Nancy ever again. Sure, the children's home was physically abusive, but Nancy was cruel in both the physical and emotional way. She would try to avoid me as much as possible, even though she was my literal guardian. And whenever she did decide to interact with me, it wasn't pleasant.
Hey, Matt.
See?
Don't say that stupid word. You're in America. Speak English.
Sorry, Auntie.
God, my brother really made the worst decision when it came to having a kid. He's adopted, not even from this country, ugly and stupid. I was fine with it as long as I didn't have to deal with it, but now my brother has to just die and leave me this thing to look over.
Sorry, Auntie.
Can you shut up and trim the bushes already? I'm tired of your weird accent.
Mom and Dad.
Mom and Dad, my ass. I'm not your mommy, Mateo. You're not even purely part of the family, so I will treat you as such.
Nancy would constantly comment on my accent and basically anything that was identifiable to my culture. She hated my curly hair and would make me cut it short so it was straighter. She also grimaced at my tanned skin tone, and according to her, I shouldn't go outside much since I was brown enough. Also, my aunt would beat me a lot for either no reason or one that doesn't even make any sense. She noticed that I would get scared if she ever held up slippers or a belt and used this to her advantage.
Mateo, do you think the length of this belt is too long?
It's fine.
Oh, don't tell me you're scared of a belt, are you? I'm gonna have so much fun scaring you.
Please don't, Nancy.
Come on, don't be such a wimp.
The fact that Aunt Nancy was making fun of my past trauma was pretty aggravating. I tried hard to let her off the hook with every new thing she did or said, and it was becoming increasingly hard to not yell back at her as the years went on. She even berated me in front of my friends from school.
You've been living here for like 7 years now. Why is your accent still so terrible?
Sorry, I've been practicing a lot.
Well, obviously your Spanish friends you have with you are keeping you from talking normally.
Auntie Nancy, stop saying that.
So are you denying my First Amendment rights now? I can't freely say what I believe?
No, but by this point, I was so done with my aunt. I apologized to my friends, and my head boiled with anger as I thought about all that Nancy had said. One day, Nancy took me to my grandparents' place since she had some sort of salon appointment. I had visited them almost every week with my parents, but ever since living with Nancy, I'd see them only about 6 times a year. Grandpa and Grandma were some of the sweetest people that I'd ever met, and I knew that I could tell them anything. So I began to complain to them about everything that I'd been going through at home with Nancy. I went into tiny details ranging from her racist remarks and distaste towards adoptees to the manual labor she forced me to do. When I was finally done ranting about my situation, Both of my grandparents were fuming in absolute fury.
Mateo, I promise we will help you. We have a lot of secrets we've been keeping, but I think it'll come to our advantage now.
Honey, I assure that Nancy will never lay a finger on you again.
Thank you. My grandparents soon revealed some shocking secrets about their life, and they were right. I really could use a lot of the stuff as weapons against my evil aunt. The next time Nancy started acting incredibly arrogant to me again, I knew it was the perfect time to work out my revenge. Aunt Nancy, is it okay if I go to the park with my friends for one of their birthdays?
I really wish your birthday could come. Then I could just kick you out already, filthy immigrant boy.
Well, I think you're the one that should be kicked out.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, don't Grandpa and Grandma own this house? I think they have all the right to be able to kick someone like you out.
What in the hell is a stupid kid like you talking about?
Well, you've acted very horribly to me for the past 3 years by insulting my culture, my appearance, and the fact that Mom and Dad had adopted me. And I know now that you don't even own this house because your parents paid for every penny.
That's not true. Stop lying. I'll call them right now.
I watched as Nancy quickly dialed my grandparents' number, and my grandma picked up. Nancy began to yell about how I was a complete liar who was just trying to embarrass and humiliate her in front of everyone I knew.
Mom, your so-called grandson keeps trying to assault me and claims that you bought my house. Mommy, tell him it's not true. Hurry. Just calm down now. We're almost at your door. Sweetheart, you know it's true. Mom? What? No, I paid for it, Mom.
Stop pretending. We wrote the check for the whole house. Nancy, it's time to also reveal the fact that you're adopted. Go ahead. Tell Mateo that you're adopted.
Dad, how can you just betray me like this?
How do you think it's right that you can just emotionally and physically hurt an adoptee from simply being loved by people other than their biological parents? We've loved you for all of your life. So how would you feel if we treated you so horribly like you have treated Mateo?
I've always been so nice to him. I'm your daughter and he's not. What a hypocrite. If he's not your brother's son, then you're not our daughter. It's time to get out of the house. But Mom, don't make me call the cops on you. We've removed you from our will and Mateo will be receiving all of our inheritance after we pass. This isn't fair. This isn't fair. I'm gonna kill you, Mom.
With that, Nancy lunged at my grandma angrily. She hit the ground, and I quickly was able to pry my aunt off of her and restrain her while Grandpa called the police. The police very quickly showed up and made sure that my grandma was okay from being pushed onto the floor. Luckily, my grandma only ended with a sore hip. On the other hand, Nancy was completely kicked out of the house and also charged with assault and resisting arrest, since she'd kicked the cops multiple times before being tased and forced into the police car. I'm not sure what happened to her, since my grandparents dealt with all of the illegal technicalities, but it's been a few years, and I haven't seen or heard from my aunt. Grandma and Grandpa gifted me Nancy's home, and I was ecstatic at this news. I did rent the house out for a few years when I went to college. I've just come home from university, and my grandparents are still doing very well. They say they have no regrets on what they did since every child deserves to have love, and she just didn't understand that. Thanks for listening.
Sorry, Kevin, someone else is calling. I'll call back in a minute. Hello? Who is this? What are you talking about?
How could you do this, you slimy bitch?
You and your son are horrible people.
You were supposed to give me grandbabies and take care of my boy. Now he's gotten one of his whores pregnant, but because of that horrible video that's circulating, she's going to force him to pay child support. Another one of them slashed his tires, but before she did that, she beat my son and even broke his nose.
My name is Natalie, and my soon-to-be husband, Albert, has been a strong-minded man since I met him. We had met through a dating app, and our first few dates went so well that we quickly moved in with each other. About a year after we moved into the same apartment, Albert proposed to me. I hadn't even met his parents yet, but I loved Albert, so I accepted the proposal. Oh, Albert! Of course I'll marry you. We started making plans for the wedding right away, but Albert wasn't the most helpful when planning the wedding because he was busy with his new promotion at work. I was thankful that my brother Kevin was always available to help. Kevin is my older brother, and ever since I can remember, he supported me. Our parents got divorced when we were younger, and even though we were raised by different parents, Kevin always made sure to keep in touch. So instead of my father walking me down the aisle for my wedding, I chose Kevin, and he soothed my nervousness. Getting married was a big step. At first, I'd refused to leave my changing room even though the dress fit me perfectly.
It will be fine, Natalie. You love the guy. This is your big day, and after the stuffy ceremony, you'll have a great party at the reception.
You're right. It's just wedding jitters. I'm a bit worried about meeting his parents.
It's a bit odd you haven't met them yet, but maybe they're quiet people. Our parents are likely to start some arguments tonight, so that's what I'm worried about. But don't worry, I'll handle them.
Kevin was able to reassure me. Things would be okay, as long as I didn't do something silly like run out on the wedding. Kevin led me out of my changing area to the large closed doors for the ceremony, and once he pushed them open, the music started and people turned to stare. After the tense walk up the aisle, Kevin let me stand in front of Albert. Albert was handsome in his suit, but it was strange that there was a woman standing next to him. She must be his mother because their faces looked very similar. All I knew about her was that her name was Sylvia. Albert, is that your mom?
She insisted that she accompany me to the altar, which is ridiculous. I'm not a girl.
It wasn't the first time that Albert had said something like that, but this time he didn't have the opportunity to apologize or make it seem less misogynistic. An uncomfortable feeling settled in my stomach, but then the officiate properly began the ceremony. Albert and I had both decided on writing our own vows, and I read mine first. My vows were simple, that I loved him and would always be faithful. When it was his turn to read his vows, Albert's mother handed him a piece of paper that he read from.
As my lovely wife, I expect you to be faithful to me and support me in anything I choose to pursue. I expect you to cook and clean. I also expect you to care for my mother as if she were your own, and to listen to her like a daughter should. In return, I will love you and provide a home for our family.
Once again, there was an uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, even if nothing was necessarily wrong. His vows seemed more self-centered than I expected of him. He seemed satisfied with himself, but when I opened my mouth to speak, the officiate continued.
And does anyone in the crowd have any reason these two should not be wed?
Stop. I can't do this.
Darling, what's wrong? You were fine just a moment ago. Don't be getting cold feet now.
This whole thing just felt off to me, and maybe I was overreacting, but we hadn't talked about his mother being with us at the altar like this. That small change in our plans set off alarm bells in my mind.
You can't run from this girl. I own you. That's what you've agreed to.
Own me? What?
The vows you agreed to be my perfect daughter, and now I own you.
Stop the wedding. I'm not getting married. Not today.
Darling, my mother is overreacting. Once we're married, she won't have so much nervous energy.
I am not overreacting, young man. Marry this girl now so you can get on with your life and find some other nice young ladies to date.
I couldn't figure out what they were talking about. Had this been some sort of setup this entire time? Wait, did you just want to marry me to be some sort of live-in servant? Albert hadn't ever treated me poorly, but he did spend a lot of extra time at work, and he supported me financially, so I did all the work in the house. Was I just a maid to him? Was he having affairs when he said he was working late?
Of course. I mean, having a warm body in bed with me at night is nice too, but I've never been a one-woman kind of guy, darling. I love you, but not much more than any other woman I've slept with. But none of them are willing to clean the house or have kids like you, and a man needs those things.
I couldn't stand it anymore. This wasn't the Albert I knew. Sometimes he said horrible things about women like this, and treated them like objects, but normally he seemed slightly ashamed of those views. Now he was clinging to that nasty mindset, and I didn't know him anymore. I backed away from the altar, but then Albert just laughed.
Don't you remember? We eloped months ago and waited so we could have the ceremony with both your parents and their new spouses. We're already married. All this celebration is just for show.
Albert was right. We had technically eloped and gotten our marriage legally recognized months ago. It just hadn't felt real to me yet since we hadn't had the ceremony. I couldn't protest the marriage, even if I left the ceremony that we'd spent so much money on. The officiate looked like he very much wanted to leave.
Smart move, my boy. Lock down the girl early so she can't get away.
You can't own anybody, and if Natalie wants to leave, she should. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, because this wedding just turned into a divorce.
What a waste of money. The ceremony will continue.
Kevin walked right up to Sylvia and Albert, and for a moment I was worried that Kevin would hurt them.
Not a chance. Our parents may have made our lives hard, but this is the least they could have done for Natalie. Our family paid for this wedding, so your family can leave. I never want to see your faces again.
Things were tense after that, even though Albert's family did leave. My family did make sure that the reception hall and the catered food didn't go to waste, but I didn't feel well enough to have fun. Instead, I took Kevin's keys and sat by myself in his car since he'd driven me here. After the party, Kevin let me stay at his apartment for the night before we talked about everything in the morning over coffee.
He was way out of line. I'll get in contact with my lawyer and we'll find you the best divorce attorney. Albert basically fully admitted to cheating on you and planning to do it in the future, in front of dozens of witnesses. You'll get your divorce and he'll probably have to pay you too.
I took Kevin's advice and his help. He had plenty of connections to lawyers since he'd gone to law school. Even though Kevin dropped out, because he realized he'd rather run his own business instead, he kept in touch with plenty of his schoolmates. The lawyer he put me in touch with was good at her job. Together, with the help of some of my younger cousins who had filmed the events at the wedding, we pushed through a divorce with Albert. All Albert had to do was sign the papers and pay me.
I won't sign these. You married me. It's not my fault you have bad judgment.
Then go marry one of your whores that you were seeing behind my back.
Maybe I will. I can find someone better than you anyway.
The argument continued, but he eventually gave up and signed the documents. Soon, the divorce was finalized, and a good portion of Albert's savings were transferred into my bank account. The video of Albert and Sylvia's misogynistic comments was posted online. I'm not sure if it was Kevin's doing, or if one of my cousins thought it might be funny. The video got a lot of engagement, and all of Albert's affairs eventually found out exactly what he'd done. With the money I got in the divorce, I was able to get a small house. I decided that after this whole mess, I wanted to be single for a while and get a few pets. What I didn't expect was a phone call from an unknown number, interrupting my call with Kevin. Sorry, Kevin, someone else is calling. I'll call back in a minute. Hello? Who is this? What are you talking about?
How could you do this, you slimy bitch?
You and your son are horrible people.
You were supposed to give me grandbabies and take care of my boy. Now he's gotten one of his whores pregnant, but because of that horrible video that's circulating, she's going to force him to pay child support. Another one of them slashed his tires, but before she did that, she beat my son and even broke his nose. She is a boxer and was furious after hearing my boy is married. And then, after all that, one of them is a secretary at his company, and she accused him of sexual harassment and forcing her, so he got fired from his job. And there's impending criminal charges. And now there's no one to take care of me in my old age. You're a monster.
He deserve it.
What did you say?
Nothing. I laughed and hung up on her before she could finish her rant. Nothing she yelled at me made me feel bad. Her and Albert had done that to themselves. I wasn't going to let anyone try and own me ever again. Luckily for me, I met someone at the gym I trained, and we are engaged now. He is a loving partner and doesn't have a toxic mother. Thanks for watching. The impending criminal charges against Albert eventually did go to court, and I followed all the updates. He did have to pay child support to the woman he'd gotten pregnant, and he got sentenced to a year in prison with a big fine for harassment. As for Sylvia, she was left alone like the miserable old woman she was. With no one to take care of her, she had to make sure she could pay all of her bills herself since Albert couldn't anymore. She'd taken multiple part-time jobs to try and pay her bills, and in her free time, she yelled in public spaces about how she didn't deserve to be alone. There were even videos of her on the news of her nonsense rants. It was honestly embarrassing, because it really was her fault. But no one believed her anyway, and the news station had labeled her as the local crazy lady in all of their footage. Thanks for watching.
Hi, my name is Michael, and I wanted to share with you the grand tale of my success, although it took a lot of hard work and effort to get here. As things started off very rocky for me, my parents were very young, and they couldn't care for me, and so they gave me up for adoption. They felt that I would have a much better chance at life if they did so, even though it was the hardest thing that they ever had to do. It didn't take long for me to be adopted by a family in another city. My new parents were fairly wealthy, and already had 2 daughters named Gloria and Emily, but had always wanted a son, and so they chose me. Growing up, they were always far stricter on me than on my sisters. If I broke something, then they would spank or hit me. Whereas my sisters would only be talked to, or at the very worst, they would be given a timeout. As I grew up, I learned to try to avoid getting in trouble and focus on doing my best in school. I didn't want to give my adoptive parents any reasons to yell at or discipline me. However, they always found reasons to do so anyways. They would always just treat me like a burden while treating my sisters like saints. When I got old enough, they started having me clean the house. It was simple things at first, such as dusting and sweeping, but eventually I was cleaning the entire house. On top of the cleaning, one day my adoptive mother said,
Michael, you have come of age. It's time for me to teach you how to cook. You lazy around a lot. You know I'm getting old, so I need you to assist me.
"You right, honey. Men should know how to cook." So she taught me how to cook and bake, and before long I was making everyone the family meals. I would have to wake up an hour early before anyone else and get breakfast and lunches ready for everyone. And then as soon as I got home from school, I needed to start getting dinner ready. It barely left me enough time for anything else, but I did manage to find time to study. Sadly, schoolwork was my only escape. Even on the weekends, my parents made sure that my days were filled with tidying up. From the moment I would wake up until the moment I would go to sleep. My parents would make me work while my sisters sat around and did nothing. For our birthdays, they would get video games or toys, and I would get mops and brooms. I knew that it was unfair that I was the only child doing chores, and that it wasn't normal for our parents to treat me the way that they did. But I had no choice but to do as they ordered me to do. It didn't help that my sisters were beginning to take lessons from our parents and force me to clean up after them.
Michael, you filthy pig. Clean my bathroom. Do it now, you lazy jerk.
And after you clean hers, then you can clean mine and also clean my room too.
But I have to study for an exam. Can't you two do it yourselves?
You can do that after you've done as we told you to do. Now get to it.
Although I was annoyed, I did as I was told, because I knew what would happen if I didn't. I was constantly tired as I could barely find enough time to sleep, since I was doing all of the chores, the cooking, the cleaning, and at the same time trying to find time to study. I began to hate my family for making me their own personal slave, and all because I was adopted. The older I got, the more they put on my plate. I always had bags under my eyes, while my sisters grew fat and lazier as the years dragged on. Even so, I managed to keep my grades high, and I did very well in school. It didn't hurt that I had no social life whatsoever, while my sisters constantly went out to parties and were barely passing their classes. Finally, when I was going to graduate from high school, I applied to every scholarship program that I could, and prayed that one of them would come to my rescue. To my surprise, my prayers were answered, and not only did I get one, but I was granted a full scholarship. I knew that I had found a way out, and I wrote a note saying that I was leaving, and left it on the kitchen table. Then I quickly packed up my bags, and as quietly as I could, I left the only home I had ever truly known. Before I left town to head to university, I stopped off at the police station and told them my situation. If I hadn't, then I had no doubt that my parents would try to claim that I ran away from home, or that I was kidnapped, and try to force me to return home. But by going to the police and notifying them that I was an adult and that I was leaving home on my own volition, then they couldn't contact the police and use them to force me to return home. And so, I went off to university and I never looked back. Between going to school and picking up a part-time job, I found that I actually had more free time than I ever had before. For the first time, I was actually able to have a social life, and it felt amazing. My time in university was such a breath of fresh air and was incredibly freeing. For the first time in my life, I was able to have friends and begin to date as well. In fact, in my third year of university, I met Angela, and the two of us became inseparable. It was a bit awkward, though, to explain to Angela what my family situation was, but she was quite understanding. After I graduated, I was able to find an entry-level position at an architectural firm. Thankfully, the company I worked for made a point of teaching me everything they knew, and it wasn't long before I became a partner. Shortly afterwards, Angela and I got married and bought a house in the same city that I grew up in. Our home was easily twice the size of the one that I grew up in, and since we both worked long hours, we knew that we would need to hire some staff to help maintain it. Between the two of us, though, we made more than enough money to cover everything. Soon after we moved in, I received a call from my sisters. Somehow, they had tracked me down and they wanted to meet with me. Reluctantly, I decided that enough time had passed, and although I would never be able to forgive them for what they had done, I was at the very least curious what had become of them. And so returned to my childhood home and was surprised to see a large for sale sign on the front lawn. Inside, my two sisters were arguing and hadn't even noticed that I had entered.
This is all your fault. If you hadn't spent all of the money before Mom and Dad had passed away, then we wouldn't be forced to sell the house to pay for our debt.
Me? I didn't spend the money. You did when you kept buying all that fancy designer clothes.
And what about all your vacations? Honestly, we'll be lucky if we don't end up living on the street.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My adoptive parents had treated me like trash and had treated these two as queens. And now that they were gone, the two of them were falling apart at the seams. Well, the two of you could always move in with me. I could tell that I was the last person that they expected to see, and the look of shock was priceless.
Michael? Where did you come from?
Wait, are you serious?
Yes, of course, after I left home, my life got infinitely better. Although I'm not offering you a free ride, I'm offering you jobs. If you, the two of you, want to work as maids, then you can live with my family, but that's the best that I can offer you.
Maids? Are you insane? I would rather live on the street than be a maid for a loser like you.
And with that, Gloria stormed out of the room, but Emily stayed. I could tell that she didn't want to accept my offer, but she truly didn't have any other choice. And so reluctantly, she came home with me and started working for my wife and I. A few weeks later, though, Emily showed up on my doorstep and apologized and begged me to take her in as well. A few weeks living on the street had shown her that she had no other choice, and so the two of them became our maids. Unlike them, and my parents though, I did treat them well, and made sure that they lived comfortably. It was rather poetic, really, that I was forced to be their servant for so many years, and now they would spend the rest of their lives serving me and my family. My only regret is that my parents didn't live to see how much they had messed up my sisters, or how I showed them compassion when they had never shown me any. Thanks for watching.
Oh hey, how's it going? I'm Lana, and my story doesn't exactly come from a book of fairy tales. For about 3 years now, I've been married to my husband Sebastian, and it has been such a fever dream. Okay. I did say that my tale wasn't exactly sweet and short from start to finish, and that is true. The relationship almost took a rough crash due to Sebastian's family. My story was far from your basic romance fantasy, and I'll just tell you just what went down with the in-laws. Sebastian and I met at my part-time job back in college. It began with him showing up consistently to my shifts to watch me, and one day he decided to talk to me. I wasn't too comfortable with him at first, but time did its thing. After becoming friends, we soon went on a date after talking for a while. That was the moment that it clicked, and I knew that I'd fallen in love with Sebastian. Sebastian and I had so much in common, and everything about him just made me fall even harder for him. For one, we both enjoyed going to theme parks and loved the same shows. We wrote poems together during our free time, and he loved hearing about whatever I had to say, and we always matched vibes. We were even both majoring in the medical field. When we'd started dating, neither of us had immediately told our parents, as we both had very strict ones. In the end, though, I took my boyfriend to my family's for dinner, and they loved and accepted him. Sebastian had called the parents before to inform them he had a girlfriend who was a Filipino. The mom just dropped the call after hearing that. Sebastian was studying to become a psychiatrist. He was also rich from birth, as his family was quite wealthy. Upon hearing this, my parents accepted him a lot more because he was passionate about having a bright future. On the other hand, Sebastian's family was less accepting of us being together. Sebastian asked his parents if he could take me to their home for dinner, and his mom completely flipped. She was frantically asking him, "What girlfriend?" and lecturing him non-stop, telling him to break up with me. Sebastian was upset by his mom's discouragement, but didn't let that get to him as he continued to date me in secret. Soon, I had graduated from university with my degree in nursing, but of course, Sebastian had a long way to go with his degrees. I soon went through my whole process and became a registered nurse. But Sebastian soon did something amazing. He proposed to me very soon after I started working. I was absolutely thrilled and couldn't wait to start my next big part of life with my no fiancé. We weren't going to have the wedding for a good while though, as I wanted Sebastian to focus on his studies. Even then, I was happy to be committed to this early on. Now that my parents somewhat actually accepted Sebastian, I decided to immediately share the news with them. Thankfully, they were also just as thrilled as I was. I also told my best friends and alumni from school. I was so happy that everyone was accepting of our relationship. Sebastian and I couldn't wait to plan out our wedding and to have it. Although his schooling kept him quite busy, it didn't stop him from finding time to spend with me every night, even if it was for only an hour or so.
Hey baby, what are you doing?
Hi, I'm just playing a video game.
Cute, let me join.
Okay. When do you think we should tell your parents about us?
Sweetie, I don't know. I mean, they are my parents. I imagine they'd like to know what's going on with their son. Maybe we can tell them a bit before the wedding.
All right then. Of course, I was very nervous, but I had to go through with this. Sebastian's family still loved him very much and deserved to know how his life was, especially now that we're engaged. A few months flew by, and just 2 months before our set wedding date, Sebastian drove us out 2 hours to visit his family and share the news. The house was very grand, with a few expensive cars parked in front. I looked at Sebastian anxiously, but he held my hand and we walked to the door together. After he knocked, a woman I could only assume was his mom answered the door. She noticed me immediately, but went in to greet her son first. When I attempted to introduce myself to her, she rolled her eyes very obviously, but allowed me to go inside. I remembered that her name was Mary. Mary escorted us to the couch before leaving and fetching her husband, Derek.
How are you? Your name was Lana, correct?
Yes, sir. I'm good, thank you.
Well, Dad, I have something to announce to you guys. Lana and I are engaged. We've already got a wedding date set, and all the preparations have been done. I'm really sorry that this was on such late notice, but we were sure that you and Mom wouldn't be too supportive.
What? Are you serious right now? I never approved of you guys to date. This is absolutely absurd. She looks like she sleeps around with guys. How can she be worth your time?
Now, Mary, let's not be too harsh.
You can't see it in her eyes? The girl is a devil. I can just feel it. And besides, her family isn't even well off. She's just leeching you for money.
Mom, can't you see that I love Lana very much? That comment was absolutely unnecessary. We've been together for almost 6 years now, and these years have been the best of my life. I'm almost at my 30s, and I definitely should not be taking orders from my parents. We're leaving, but you're still invited to come to the wedding if you wish. We can handle it without you, though.
Sebastian quickly got up and took my hand, dragging me out of the house. I felt very empty for a bit as we sat in the car. I'm not sure what I was feeling exactly, but I knew that I felt bad for Sebastian. All he wanted was for his parents to love the choices and progress he made in his love life, and they couldn't give him that. I wasn't feeling too insulted, but maybe the slut-shaming did make me feel a bit horrible about myself. I felt my eyes well up with tears, and my fiancé quickly noticed.
Honey, don't cry. We will make this all work out.
But how? Your parents hate the idea of us being together, so you might not see your mom and dad at your own wedding.
You're more important than them at this point. Why don't we go to that bakery place you love?
My fiancé's words were comforting, and I decided to listen to him. As the wedding date began to approach, things got more tense as we had to make sure everything was ready, on top of our work and school. The only thing that helped us was getting intimate occasionally. One day while I was at my nursing shift, I got a text from my best friend. She sent over a social media account that was explaining something. I clicked into it, and it was an anonymous user who vowed to expose me for the terrible things I did. I was very confused, but the user had made a few posts. They read things such as, Lana was a tramp who couldn't stop getting with the football team, and she cheated on her boyfriend with 4 other guys. And even Lana drunk drove and killed an innocent civilian when she was 17. Search it up, we'd never lie. I felt absolutely sick to my stomach. Who could ever come up with such blatant statements like this? There wasn't even solid proof in the posts, just insane claims followed by a long essay describing my so-called crimes in detail. I texted Sebastian about what I'd just discovered and tried not to cry, especially because I was at work. He began accusing me about my morals, and I thought that my life was about to crumble before me. After a bit of thinking, though, Sebastian texted back, assuring me not to worry about anything. I felt terrible that he believed the posts at first. He was eventually able to figure out the location from where the user posts, and believe it or not, it was in the same area that Sebastian's parents lived. I should have seen that coming earlier. But the two of us were able to report the account for spreading false news, and Sebastian called up his parents angrily, demanding that they stop posting on the account. They were equally pissed, but they knew this wasn't working, so they did stop. This didn't stop them from sending me threatening texts, though. Finally, it was the day of the wedding, and I was extremely excited. Sebastian and I went to the wedding venue where there were people we've hired to help us. They had everything set up, and everything looked beautiful. One of the workers led me up to the room where I'd get ready, where my dress would be ready for me, as well as several makeup artists. When I walked in, I was quite surprised to see that my soon-to-be mother-in-law was in the room. She smiled and explained that she, along with Derek, had an apparent change of heart. I felt a bit relieved and sat down so that the makeup artists could get started on their task. Then I heard the door close, and thinking that was normal, I continued on with the preparation. When it was time to put on the dress, one of the dressers gasped when she opened the closet door. I turned around and was shocked to find that my gorgeous dress was gone. I frantically called Sebastian and told him that it was missing. He appeared confused that the dress could have just disappeared, but he said that he'd try to help find it. A few minutes later, I hear screaming outside the house. I looked out the windows and saw my dress being absolutely engulfed in flames. This couldn't be happening right now. I ran outside just in time to see a few guys putting out the fire. I began to cry as I held the burned and torn dress. I was wailing as the venue management tried hard to comfort me. Sebastian ran out of the house and he started fuming when he saw what had happened. This was a $4,000 dress, and I was going to wear it down the aisle. We looked at each other and our brains put together the pieces at the same time. This had to be the work of Sebastian's mother. But the venue management suggested that we continue on with the wedding. We shrugged, and the dressers even decided to come up with something else. I wasn't about to let some jealous people get the better of me. Only an hour had passed, and it was finally time for me to walk down the aisle. I did so, and everyone was a bit shocked. I had on a black and very fancy dress, and in my hands was the dress that my mother-in-law had destroyed. I didn't care, though. I was going to go through with the ceremony. When it was time for the rings to be put on our fingers, the man could not find it in the box at all. Sebastian and I had known again what happened, but just before I was about to break down for the second time, my mom and dad stepped up, giving us their wedding rings. It was such a sweet gesture that I began to cry in front of the whole crowd. They were very moved as well, and the ceremony was completed as people started clapping happily. After the wedding, Sebastian took me to a hotel where we got very intimate. I loved how much of a romantic he was, and we just laid in each other's arms non-stop. But then, my husband started getting calls on his phone. He rolled his eyes, seeing as it was his mom. She sounded pissed.
I just saw your post. What do you mean you actually got married to her?
Mom, don't do this right now. You just stole our wedding rings and destroyed Lana's expensive dress.
Well, she deserved for that to happen. I can't believe you had a wedding with a black dress. You should have just canceled the wedding altogether. She's just a good-for-nothing loser who's obsessed with cheating, she's stupid, ugly, and I honestly don't even know what you saw in her. Divorce her right now, or I'll shoot her dead with my gun. In fact, I'm already outside your door. Open up.
Sebastian immediately hung up. He looked outside the peephole, and sure enough, his mom was approaching. I quickly called the police and we barricaded ourselves inside the bathroom, scared.
I won't hurt you, my baby Sebastian. But your little wife really needs to be killed right now. I didn't approve of this, Sebi. Open the door like a good son.
Oh God, this was absolutely terrifying. But we didn't say a word, and instead waited very patiently while cramped up in the bathroom. After an eternity, the police showed up and caught Mary banging on the door with her gun. Obviously, this looked very threatening, so they detained Mary and told us that we could come out now. Sebastian glanced at me and we began laughing. I had the whole call recorded on my phone, as well as the threats Mary had made outside the door. I posted it to my page, and because I had many friends on the site, the video quickly started getting views. Anyway, everything that happened after this was quite a blur. We were in court against my mother-in-law for her threats against us. Mary was only to be put in jail for 6 months and was fined to pay the dress and ring as well, but she kept acting rude and getting into trouble, so her sentence always increased little by little. The video got so popular within the next week that we were even interviewed by a small news channel. Mary's daughter were so embarrassed that they cut ties with her, according to one of Sebastian's cousins. Derek has come to apologize a few times, and I accepted his apology, but not Mary. I have decided she might never get to see her grandkids. When Mary was finally released, I found out that Mary's home was doxxed, and people showed up constantly to harass her by throwing eggs at the windows and putting letters criticizing her actions under the door. She was probably living a very depressed life now. To be honest, I'm not even sure why she hated me. Tough for them, I guess. Some of my friends say that what happened to Mary were too harsh, but I don't think so. What are your opinions?